Okay, welcome to this video. So today we'll talk about sick day management. So what you can do if you're not feeling well, if you're sick, things that you can do to hopefully feel a little bit better and to make sure that there's no complications or anything that comes with your illness. So when you are feeling ill, let's say you have the flu or if you have different illnesses, it's a good idea to make sure that you're keeping an eye on what you're eating, the fluids that you are drinking, and some of the medications that you're on that might have to be reduced or stopped if you are feeling ill. It's a good idea, especially if you're on different medications for diabetes and let's say insulin also, to keep an eye on what you're eating, because if you are eating a little bit less, then maybe the insulin that you're taking is a little too much. Just to keep an eye on it. So if you are still eating and drinking fluids, just some people like to test their blood sugars, and it might be a really good time to test your blood sugars to see where they fall. When you're feeling sick, you might notice that your blood sugars will go up, or for some people they might also go down. But it could be a good indication, especially if you're not feeling too good. You test your blood sugars and they are up, it might be a good indication that something is going on too. So it is good to have a meter at home, even if you're not checking on a regular basis. So if ever you have a sickness, you have an illness, something like that, you can check your blood sugars just to make sure that they are still in target and they're not going too high or too low. But it's a good idea to make sure you're drinking enough fluids throughout the day so that you don't become dehydrated, which might bring on a set of problem on its own too. So just make sure that if you're sick, you know what to do, and if you don't, you can always contact your healthcare provider just to make sure that they can tell you what you need to do in order to kind of protect yourself. Like I mentioned, you just want to avoid the risk of being dehydrated too when you are feeling sick and when you're living with diabetes as well. So it's a greater risk of dehydration if, let's say, you're vomiting, you're having diarrhea, if you have a fever, and then if you have excessive exposure to heat without drinking enough water. Like let's say if it's a heat wave in the summer and you're not drinking enough water. So all those things can cause dehydration. So it's important to drink plenty of fluids, and you want to get them with as the minimal sugar as you can. So trying to limit things like juices or regular pop. But if you do drink or you go for fluids, maybe you can consider like an electrolyte replacement, especially if you're sweating a lot in the summer. So that might be like a Gastrolyte or a Pedialyte. It can be clear soups or broths. Obviously water is a really good idea too. If you do go, some people feel that, let's say like ginger ale helps them when they're not feeling good. So going for like a diet ginger ale, which won't affect your blood sugars. In those moments too, it's good to limit caffeine. So limit the amount of times or the amount of coffee and tea and soda that you're drinking, just because it can kind of make the dehydration worse. If you're on different medications, it's a good idea to prevent any kind of low blood sugars, so any hypoglycemia. And if you're not eating as much as you did before that you usually do, it might be a good idea to replace some of those foods with fluids that do have carbohydrates in them. So it could be, and that's just to prevent your blood sugars from going low. So that's why it's a good idea to test your blood sugars, see where they are. If they are on the lower side, it could be a good idea to go for things like applesauce, like half a cup of applesauce. Some people will like yogurt or milk. It could be a good idea to have a little bit of juice as well. Pudding, if you're not feeling good, popsicles might be helpful too. And that's just to make sure that your blood sugars don't start to drop too low. So that's a really good idea, especially if you are on insulin and you're not eating. It might be a good idea to replace some of the foods that you typically eat with just some really simple carbohydrates, so like some of those that I mentioned. If you are on insulin, it's good, especially when you're feeling sick, to check your blood sugars a little bit more often, and you might need to adjust the amount of insulin that you typically take. If you're eating a little bit less than normal, and if you're at risk of being dehydrated, Some medications might need to be temporarily stopped. Depending on what you have, you might find some medications in the list here. But some of the diabetes medication, things like glycoside might be stopped, but if you're ever questioning, you can always talk to a pharmacist or to your healthcare provider. If your symptoms do last for a long time and if you are dehydrated, different medications will need to be stopped. So certain blood pressure medications, you'll find a list here. Some people take water pills, which do need to be stopped as well. And then for diabetes medication, things like metformin will need to be stopped. And then if you are on SGLT2 inhibitor, so those can be like Invokana, Forxiga, Jardiance, and we'll cover a little bit of the different diabetes medication in the next few videos. And then pain medications like Advil or different ibuprofens or things like that will need to be stopped as well. But if ever you're questioning if you need to stop any medication, it's a good idea to even call your pharmacy, say that you're not feeling too well, that you might be dehydrated or you're at risk of dehydration, and then they can help you choose or help you know what kind of medications you might need to stop.